By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late to undo quietly. There was no press alert, no emergency statement, no legal filing leaked to the media. Just a gap. 2 children connected to one of the most documented families on Earth had slipped out of view, not dramatically, not emotionally, but methodically. And that difference mattered. Royal crises usually arrive loud, messy, and public. This one arrived as silence. A silence so complete that it triggered concern, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Within hours, people trained to notice patterns began asking a question no institution built on continuity ever wants to ask. How do children surrounded by protection vanish without resistance? By the end of that day, it was clear this wasn't confusion or coincidence. It was intention. And once intention entered the picture, the story stopped being personal and started becoming institutional. The first warning didn't come from the palace, the press, or a lawyer. It came from a school attendance log. 2 names went unanswered. At first, no one panicked. Families travel, schedules change, excuses arrive late. But as hours passed, concern crept in because nothing followed. No voicemail, no email, no explanation. When administrators reached out through the usual channels, there was no reply. Another school reported the same absence. Another attempt to make contact failed. Individually, these details meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern that professionals are trained not to ignore. What stood out wasn't absence, but lack of transition. No transfer request, no homeschooling declaration, no notice of relocation. It wasn't chaos, it was clean. And clean exits are what trigger quiet alarms. As internal checks continued, something unsettling surfaced. Medical appointments had been canceled without replacement. Long-standing pediatric care was terminated without referral. Welfare liaisons found their messages, returned unopened. Even scheduled mediation communications went unanswered. These systems don't exist for optics. They exist so children remain anchored to adults who can testify to their well-being. And here, those anchors were being removed one by one. Trained assessors recognized the difference instantly. Neglect leaves disorder. Panic leaves mistakes. This left nothing behind. Every exit was deliberate, documented, and final. The language inside internal reports shifted quietly from delay to withdrawal. Not withdrawal from publicity, withdrawal from oversight. And once that distinction is made, the concern escalates whether anyone wants it to or not. Then came the confirmation that froze the room. An education trust tied to institutional oversight had been dissolved, not paused, not restructured, fully dismantled. Funds redirected away from any framework accountable to court or crown. No alternative plan was registered in its place. No explanation followed. 4. Advisors reviewing the timeline. This wasn't just another data point. It was the pivot. Trusts don't attract photographers. Doctors don't leak stories. Schools don't sell narratives. These structures protect children, not images. Removing them signaled something deeper than privacy concerns, and the timing made it impossible to ignore. The withdrawals happened days before scheduled legal proceedings, days before accountability mechanisms were set to engage. Silence stopped looking accidental, it started looking strategic. Inside the palace, the framing changed again. This was no longer discussed as a parental dispute. It was classified as a visibility risk. Visibility is protection. A child can be shielded without being erased. But when every professional witness is removed at once, shielding becomes concealment. That distinction matters because once no school can confirm attendance and no doctor can verify care, no institution can testify to a child's reality. One advisor tried to soften the interpretation, suggesting temporary relocation or media fear. The response was simple. Then why remove the trust? There was no answer. Because the removal didn't protect against cameras. It protected against accountability. And that realization pushed the situation across a line that once crossed does not allow for delay. By the time the next internal briefing convened, the palace stopped reacting to events and started examining intent. What emerged wasn't rumor or emotion, but a theory built from aligned timelines, legal refusals, and financial withdrawals. Advisors called it strategic disengagement. Over months, connections had been quietly reduced, then removed. References phased out. Oversight declined, future plans drafted without shared frameworks. The language used in supporting documents didn't reference care or stability. It referenced alignment, separation, and independence. That detail mattered. Privacy protects children while keeping them anchored. Erasure cuts the anchor entirely. Each action on its own could be explained away. Together, they formed a trajectory. And institutions don't respond to moments, they respond to trajectories. Prince William didn't receive the briefing in private or at leisure. He was pulled from a public engagement mid-session, excused without explanation, and driven straight to Windsor. Waiting for him was a red folder stripped of commentary and softened language. Just facts, cancellations, withdrawals, silence. When he reached the final page, he didn't react emotionally. He reframed the issue entirely. This wasn't about adult conflict anymore. It was about whether two children were being allowed to drift out of history. That sentence changed the response from procedural to decisive. He asked one question that mattered more than blame. What happens if we do nothing? The answer was immediate. Without intervention, the children would remain legally traceable but practically unanchored, their lives dependent on a single narrative with no external witnesses. That was when structural guardianship entered the conversation. A mechanism rarely discussed, almost never used, designed for moments when continuity itself is threatened. It bypasses prolonged disputes and focuses solely on restoring structure when delay becomes harm. William didn't ask whether it would look severe. He asked whether it was lawful. It was. He asked whether the threshold had been met. Silence answered that question. Once activated, the issue stopped being framed as custody and started being framed as stewardship. Not control, not punishment, but responsibility. The Crown exists to preserve continuity, and once continuity is endangered, hesitation becomes negligence. The decision wasn't announced, it was executed. International movement authority was suspended, not as restriction, but as protection against untraceable relocation. Commercial use of the children's names and likenesses was frozen, removing them entirely from monetizable space. A restoration trust was established under Crown oversight, designed to fund education, medical continuity, and emotional care long after headlines faded. Inside the palace, the term used wasn't punishment, it was firewalling, a barrier erected to stop further damage while systems recalibrated. And for the first time in weeks, witnesses returned. Schools could log attendance, doctors could verify care. Stability resumed quietly, which was the point. What followed wasn't spectacle, it was closure. Requests for clarification were acknowledged procedurally, then met with silence. Media partners adjusted metadata, contracts paused pending review. Platforms recalibrated risk exposure without being told to. Recognition had been withdrawn, and once recognition disappears, access collapses on its own. No accusations were made. None were needed. The institution didn't argue. It simply moved on. That shift left little room for counter-narratives because this wasn't about public opinion anymore. It was about authority already exercised inside Windsor. Focus shifted where it always does after rupture. Repair. Educational plans were rebuilt, medical continuity restored. Long-term emotional support quietly expanded by professionals trained in identity disruption and transatlantic displacement. This wasn't care for headlines. It was care designed for years. The children were reintegrated into routines governed by predictability rather than reaction. Attendance logged, progress observed, witness restored. That mattered more than any statement. A brief acknowledgement confirmed guardianship resolution under protocol. No explanation followed. None was required. The institution had spoken through action. Public conversation fractured the way it always does. Some called the outcome ruthless, others inevitable. Many searched for villains, but that misses the point entirely. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about preventing a kind of loss that can't be repaired once it happens. History isn't erased through explosions. It's erased through silence, through the slow removal of witnesses until no one can testify to who a child is, where they belong, or how they were protected. The monarchy has survived precisely because it knows when stories must end and structures must take over. In this case, it didn't act to control a narrative. It acted to stop two children from drifting into invisibility. And once that line is crossed, there is no dramatic ending, only continuity, quietly restored.